Wow, this is huge. I did not expect such a large and enthusiastic audience. I was so happy to see all of you here and very glad to be here with the panelists. So we've decided to do this sort of as a roundtable, but we're going to start off with a little bit of introductions of ourselves. We can each talk for some minutes about, our history, what we were doing, and then we'll sort of get into a whole bunch of Q&A. So I wanted to go chronologically, not by our ages or how long we've worked or anything like that, but what the time frames were that we were working in computer gaming and doing the types of things that we wanted to talk to you about today. So you're on first, right? You are on first.
I was hoping someone on the panel had actually programmed with a soldering iron so I could be the second person.
Exactly. No, because you're really on first.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop your slides
thank you
in.
very
So
much.
let me pop your slides in.
Thank you.
And you can remain seated or
I
stand
intend
if
to.
you want to. Okay, either way is fine. I'm going to shrink this guy up. You can see my desktop, which is insane.
Well, I say, if it looks too polished, you're not at a tech conference.
Right, exactly.
You're at a sales presentation.
But I know where everything is. Okay, and let me get there we go, VCF East 2020.
I mean, you're losing credibility the mere fact that you didn't have to play with the AV equipment for that long.
Exactly. So do you want to flip through these slides?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so you can just click on whatever you
So-
want and make it as large as
Yes,
you
because
want.
they're sort of in
Right,
alphabetical
so
order,
then
but
you
I
can
know,
just- Yeah, you
yeah,
can do it.
just to show a few. Hi.
All right, take your time.
So a little of that background gives you an idea of why I'm into weird interests, because I come from people with weird interests. And they said it's okay if no one else understands what you enjoy doing, because really when someone says, I enjoy gardening, you really can't figure out what about gardening they like. It's just a lot of work in the dirt, in the heat. But other people, when they hear you garden, they go, oh, yeah, okay, garden. They hear you're into computer games, hardware, writing, working with art equipment. They feel obligated to tell you you're weird. And I'm just so glad that everyone in this room goes, oh, yeah, I'm interested in that too. That's normal. Okay, so I'm just so happy to be here. So I'm just going to show a picture or two and then go a little bit the background. This is, whoops. Yeah, it's not Linux, is it?
No, it's not Linux. Click over here.
And I'm getting too old to double click
There we
quickly.
go, and then we can make it
Yes.
large. Really huge. There you
I
go.
guess I should have gone, it was proper to make me go first because I know the least about new technology, apparently. I am old.
That's okay, that's fine.
That's me seated and my little sister, and that's the one of the Fred prototypes that my dad did on the 1802, and that's the gravity feed card reader that my father would write articles about and say, and even the dog participates by punching the key cards with her teeth.
And I brought one that I
Right.
have from RCA over there, so
Yes.
similar to the one that
Well, this is the prototype,
Yeah,
and
that's
Dad
the
said,
prototype.
Dad said when you're designing them, never buy the boxes from Radio Shack and put your stuff in it for a prototype, because it looks like you didn't take a lot of care with the insides if you just bought one of those brown boxes or steel boxes that everyone uses. Go down to the plastics company, go through the scrap bin, and get some really nice milky white lucite, and make your own box, and use blue vector board for your printed circuit board, so it looks like a finished product. And the guys who don't know technology in the meeting can say, oh, I could see that as a product, and ignore the rest of your presentation. So I grew up with really good hints like that. So it's a little weird background, but I figured people would like to see that gravity feed card reader, since it never made it to a product.
So if
Yes,
we
thank you.
escape,
Well, thank you.
Can
I
probably
just tab
go
through?
Yeah, just tab through. You use the right.
Thank you.
That'll
Oh,
take
there.
you through.
And
There you
this is my mother and my nephew, and I just like to show that not all old people can't play video games, and not all kids are born to it. And you'll see those are modern controllers, so they were actually playing a fairly modern game about 20 years ago, and Mom was beating them badly because she grew up play testing games. Yes, I say. Thank you.
And if you want to expand.
And yeah, I'll just
I
tap
think
through.
it's good.
And my dad's book, Home Computers Can Make You Rich, which was the layman things you could do, like jewelry out of old printed circuit boards and buttons with cute sayings for the flea market. Probably things you've all seen and bought at computer shows and ham festivals and all. That was 1980. And this is my dad and me and my sister on the end when I was playtesting his early games, and I was the audience for his magic tricks and his children's books. That if you go to the Hagley Museum and look for the Weisbecker papers, you can actually see some of his children's books. Everything was computer related. Even the books are like Charlie the Cross-Eyed Computer, who is a computer who can't tell the difference between 6s and 9s, which in rhyme he explains is really bad if you're a computer because people ask you questions all the time, like, how do I build a car? And if you can't do the math, you wind up with a car with square wheels, and everyone's mad at you. But of course, you know, in 1963, 64, you're not going to get any closer to computer parts than stories about them. I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry, yes, wrong key. I forgot that fast forward to remember. This is me in 1976. This is the time I was doing the video games for the VIP instruction manual, and then the next year and year after that would be the Studio 2 and the VIP games manual. That's me in 85. And this is one of my father's games, Psychedelic 9. It was a tangram puzzle that he made into a competitive game by the two of you pick pieces and have to actually complete a rectangle first. Oh, and this is what set me on a career for art, since this year is our art theme. Jeff Windsor, an engineer at RCA, he did this. My father brought it home and he said, see, this is what happens when an artist takes a limited medium like graph paper compared to the rest of us engineers, where we start with graph paper and we get these little stick figures, we get those little spaceships that look like from Space Invaders, and those little weird guys. Artists actually draw what they want and then fit it to the restricted medium so it still looks good. And I swear, this little guy looks like he's 3D, and he's on the same screen that all those clunky games are done on. And that set me on a lifetime goal to say, AI is figuring out how to get the computer to draw things like that for you without someone having to draw absolutely every frame by hand. And of course, I haven't gotten there yet because I don't have my games out that require the computer to draw the pictures. But I just want you to see that, can I refresh the back and then back? That, yeah, you would never know that's just graph paper and the same clunky graphics that you do Pong on. And that's my sequence shoot. Following my father's footsteps, that is just a little guy with a hat and a gun. It has nothing to do with copyright infringement on Dick Tracy. Just like an elf picture of a spaceship has nothing to do with any licensed intellectual property. Just a coincidence. And this was the targets flash in order, and you shoot them in order to add to your score. Oh, sorry. I keep hitting the natural button is the other way. That's his game. Now, his game, it's not his game Stay Alive. His game was Decisions. It played like that. Marvin Glass and Associates did this, and Milton Bradley sold it, but it infringed on my father's patent because it was so similar to it, and he wound up getting a partial license from it. Whoa. Yes, nice. That was. He said, always patent your stuff. Yeah, and always try to get into manufacturing, because they never would have contacted him if some other company hadn't bought it and was manufacturing it already. So I just bring life lessons, people. Protect your intellectual property and try to get it out there so people know it's yours. Okay, so this is my Speedway game. Again, this is the same graphics that the Dragon was done on, but this is all I can come up with for a car race game. But I had so much fun doing this because RCA said they wanted this quiz game, and nobody wanted to bother with it because quiz is too simple. He said, so I talked him into letting you do it. And I said, do you want to look at games? And they said, yeah, well, we need a card game. And I thought about it. I said, you can't make a card game on that kind of graphics with a slow processor. Isn't a car race game all about the idea of hurtling through space and fast reaction times? But I remembered I was going to give up, and I thought, well, this is an opportunity to get a game out there. I remember my father always said, if you can't, sometime in your life you'll be expected to pull a rabbit out of a hat. And if you can't figure out how to pull a real rabbit out of a real hat, you can always pull a tissue paper rabbit out of a hat-shaped envelope and hope your audience has a good sense of humor. To which my mother added, but never assume your teacher has a good sense of humor. And I said, oh, that's right. Your boss, your teacher, this is for other events in your life. So I decided to do one from scratch that tried to add drama. And I remember every interview I saw with Alfred Hitchcock about building suspense, focusing people's attention, and my dad's lessons on magic tricks and directing people's attention. The whole game is about you avoiding crashes more than your opponent avoids crashes. And no one really, when they play it, notices the poor graphics because you're so intent in not crashing and delaying and winning that you have narrow focus on just the next corner coming up in your car. And the sound effect of crashing happens before either car slows down. So it trains you to cringe whenever you hear that screech because you don't know it's your car or your opponent's car until a little while later when you see whether your car slows down or not. And that's the drama and pacing. And then once you crash, you come to a dead stop, and then you slowly build up again. So it gives you a chance to relax, take your attention off it, redo your focus. And it naturally occurs during the game that you have these dramatic scenes play out over and over again without having to be on rails or scripted. It's so much fun doing it. But then I went back to doing just games that you could tell from the title what they were going to be about for the VIP Games Manual, because if you type them in, someone has to know it's worth the effort to type it in. This, they buy it, it says car race game. If it's not what they thought and they still like it, it's okay. So that's, I stopped thinking of games as a career when I did that, because working on just games after that was just a job. If you're going to do just a job, you might as well do something in a steady industry that pays better, that you learn programming techniques and big data analysis and data processing skills that you can use when you start your own game company someday and you're doing large multiplayer games online. And my father did Think-A-Dot, which is used to teach courses at Yale and MIT in group theory. And he tried to sell the world's smallest giant brain. And it's like a little, I'm hoping the audience is old enough to remember the little plastic counting your balls and strikes when you play baseball, okay? It was that, but it plays NIM against you. But it's a practical joke. It's not a game, because every other time you win, and the alternate time it wins. So you just played a couple times, so you just lost. Then you show your friend how to play, it's easy, you do it, and they don't win because it's a known game. And you say, look, you just do this, watch how I do it, and you win.
That's great. That is so neat.
But again, this is the 60s, and practical jokes and novelties were the industry then that it isn't now. But again, this is my idea of little games, practical jokes, things I thought the video game industry would be adopting, and oh well. Am I at the end of it?
Is that the end?
That may
Is that
be.
the last one?
Yes. I'll have to
Yeah,
start.
yes, that's
I started in the middle, so I'll have to start at the
Oh,
beginning.
okay. All right, so let me,
Thank you. Tech support.
do you need to go back to?
Yes, I just named the full.
Good question. How do
Yeah.
we get rid of it?
I'm glad no one knows how to
Okay,
use
okay.
Windows still.
Take it that way, and then I'll go back to just the drive itself.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
But when we were little kids, you're seeing, my sister and I were play testers for my father's toys and games. We were the audience for his magic tricks. We were the audience for his reading his children's books aloud in rhyme. And he actually wrote books that played a game against you. And he did that in '69. By 1974, the first Choose Your Own Adventure novel came out, which was a heck of a lot more popular than playing tic-tac-toe against the computer or NIM against the computer. But the idea my father had was if you can get little kids playing a game where you turn the page to make your move and turn the page to whatever the page says, I made my move, you get them used to programming. So when they're older and they get a class in Introduction to Programming, they go, wait a minute, this sounds familiar. This is just like these books, except the computer does it next. I don't actually have to turn the page. And so, again, everything's an introduction to computer logic or computer programming.
So I don't know what the next,
Well, I was going to go to the
File
top and
is.
just,
oh, do you want me to
yeah,
slide
just,
up?
yeah, if you could
Okay.
just get the first
So
one,
just
because
go
I
to the
started in the
very
middle.
first ones?
Yes.
Oh, here.
Yes,
Okay.
I foolishly thought that
That's
I was
okay, yes.
going to pick and choose. There we go.
So you want this one? Okay, so now let me.
And this
put-
is Computer Coin
make that one
Games.
bigger.
This was, Creative Computing sold this, and Computer Coin Games were digital logic on a piece of paper with a penny as the flip-flop. So you put the pennies heads up and tails up the way they told you to set up, and then you start at the beginning, and you trace through the arrow, and when you hit a penny, you flip it, and you follow the heads out or the tails out, and you flip the next one. And again, it would play NIM, it would guess your number. There's many games in there you play. And when I was at college and showing my roommates this, one of the girls said, wait a minute, I think I got it. And she looked at it and she set up the 20 questions. It guesses which name on the list you were from, which list is on this page, which of these lists. And she set it up, reversed from the end, set up everything and said, try it. You're going to guess whatever word. And we did. And I said, yeah, this is exactly what it, and she wasn't a computer programming major. She's a marketing major. And I go, yeah, see, Dad was right. If you show people what a flip-flop and digital logic look like in a way they can understand and you can see what it's actually doing, people get it and they can reverse engineer it. Oh, is this one? Yeah. That's the decisions. That's the one that Stay Alive infringed on. This is Fleep House. This is when we were really little. This is just random. You drop the little fleeps down the chimney, they're irregular shaped, and they show up under one door or the other. And the player who drops it, the other player gets to choose which door, and the idea is to wind up having all the fleeps when you're done. And he wanted that because we were 5 and 3, and he wanted a game we could both play, so it had to be completely random. But for the older young child, not seem to be completely random, or they're not going to play it, and lets the younger one win. So this is the only one that, well, unless you consider a random number generator with a binary output, computers, this is the only one that wasn't computer-based. And this is the jackpot game. Can I play it? Yes. This is my,
Oh,
yes,
do
thank
you
you.
want it to
Yes,
move?
that's
Get it to move.
an MPEG. There we go.
There you go.
Ooh, you really run the MPEG fast.
Oh, I lost.
It's not that fast in real life. This was my jackpot game, my one-arm bandit. I had done this for the VIP instruction manual first, and the next year was Studio 2. And of course, my first thought is, well, I already have the game. I ported it over to the Studio 2. I have one done. And I thought, well, I didn't mind doing a gambling game. In an instruction manual, you have to type in the code, because what little kid is going to be able to type in the code on their own? But you have a cartridge you just put in. Little kids may play that unsupervised. And I'm thinking back, a couple of years ago, my sister and I first discovered betting, and we bet, one summer, we ruined our entire relationship, because whoever's ahead doesn't want to give the money back, and whoever's behind wants to just call off all the bets and make it even again. And we were betting on ping pong and shooting hoops in the street, and not just game, everything. And we went wild, and I said, I don't want that on a cartridge game with little kids unsupervised. So that's why it's only in the instruction manual, and there isn't a game with it. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yes, there we go. And we're back. That was we're back.
Okay, so that was all.
Yeah, so
Okay,
that was
great.
just one I wanted to show you a little sampling of what went on.
Awesome. Okay,
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Grab my microphone. All right, so I will do part 2. So sort of picking up where her dad was at RCA, and in the 70s, I was spending a lot of time in college. So 1 degree wasn't enough. I'm actually ambidextrous, as some of my students will notice when I'm writing at the chalkboard, I'll start out with my left hand and then just stand right there and then just start writing. I just switch my hands with chalk and just start writing with the other hand. I don't even notice that I'm doing it, but I've always been ambidextrous. My brother and I are both ambidextrous. Our sister was really just totally left-handed, so that could explain a lot. Who knows? But in any event, because of being ambidextrous, I have really this sort of left brain, right brain thing going on that I'm never really happy if just the analytical side is working, like just computer science and math and stuff like that. And if I'm just working on the other side, the arts and music and things like that, I need to have that balance. Even to this day, I still need to have that balance. I'm never really happy if I'm just working on one side of the brain or the other side of the brain. So what I was doing in the 70s after graduating from high school was I was working on 2 college degrees simultaneously. One of the schools didn't know about the other one. They probably would have thrown me out. But basically, I was majoring in classical guitar down at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. What's now the University of the Arts, then it was the Philadelphia Musical Academy. And at Penn State Abington, I was taking classes, and I was a full degree major in both of these schools. At Penn State Abington, originally majoring in music education, but then I decided to go into computer science because I was like, wow, they have, all this sort of computer stuff going on. So it was an IBM mainframe, which was up at main campus. So it was IBM 360/370. And then I wound up doing some of my coursework at Temple University using some of the early P2Ps that they had down there. So basically, that was it. It was like left brain, right brain stuff that I was doing throughout the entire 70s, and did ultimately manage to get both a degree in computer science and a degree in classical guitar. So now I'm like, okay, it's now starting to be the 80s, and I have to figure out how am I going to actually work in this field. And by the way, back in the day, Penn State especially was extraordinarily inexpensive. It was a trimester school, and you could, for each of the trimesters, the 3, fall, winter, and spring, it was a whopping $200 per semester or per trimester. So $600, that's all you really needed, and you could pay your tuition for the entire year. So what I was doing in the evenings was I'm teaching classical guitar in the basement of my parents' house for $2 a person. Now, these were 10-week semesters, so all I had to, you could do the multiplication, and I'm not going to do it for you, but I didn't really have to teach that many lessons per week in order to get the money that I needed in order to pay for the next semester's, trimester's tuition. So also in the day at school, you could run around and be an AV person. So I was doing that as well.
No
and
wonder
also,
you're so good at this.
Yes, exactly. And also working in the computer lab. So you would get extra bonus money. Now, again, they were paying like $2 an hour, but those $2 would add up. And so I was able to pay my full tuition, didn't own a car or anything, but I was able to make my way through, and then also was earning money for going to the University of the Arts. So that was basically what I was doing during the 1970s. But getting heavily involved in starting to design things, hardware. I would go, there was this parts place, they would get old engineering supplies and things like that. And you could even get keyboards, like I got organ keyboards, and I was going to the Radio Shack. I like watching young Sheldon because he's always at the Radio Shack. So I would go to the Radio Shack and get these parts. They had these chips. And so I was wiring up boards and creating my own synthesizers, primitive as they were, things like that. So again, combining the arts and the music and the computer science and engineering and all of that combined together during that period of time. By the end of the 1970s, I was married to a guitarist. We're still friends, though we are long divorced now, but in any event, I was doing some music teaching, things like that. But the guitarist I was married to, his father had a friend, longtime colleague, who was a technician at RCA Laboratories in Princeton. So I started applying there. Basically, that was sort of the way it was back in the day, maybe even the way it sort of is now. You had to know somebody. He got me an application. I filled it out and, you know, wrote in what I was interested in, what I was doing, what my degrees were. But I was always very careful when I wrote down the name of the Pennsylvania State University, because I knew if I wrote it all out like that, a lot of people would read it and think I went to the University of Pennsylvania. So, and in fact, that is exactly what happened. Probably I would not have been hired there. You know what? She only went to Penn State, so what the heck could she possibly know? But in any event, I wrote this all out. I did the interview. They were very excited about me, and they were starting a personal computer project. So this is now the early 1980s, so I was hired in the spring of 1980 to work on the home computer project that had already begun. They were going to try to basically advance what your father had done, you know, with these limited machines. This one over here, by the way, that's just a keyboard. That's just like, you know, that you could connect to a computer and then do some remote typing and things like that. So, so they were looking at doing that, and there was an entire team. It was called the Advanced Microprocessor Group, and so it was like a secret project, and we were working on developing a home computer that was going to rival the Apple and things, you know, machines of that ilk. So one of the phrases that we used to have was creeping featureism. No matter what we got done there in building this computer, the management always wanted more features. So it was always, okay, can you make the fonts look better? And can you make this better? And can you make this run faster? So everything, they always wanted more and more and more features, so you were never actually done. In the meanwhile, you could tell by the dates, since all of you are interested in historic computing, especially personal computing, the IBM PC was about to come out, and then it did come out. So all of these competitive things, Commodores and other equipment was coming out. And then RCA was really very stupid in that particular era. Back in the day when David Sarnoff was running RCA, he was very possessive about not letting people come into the laboratories and see what was going on. But no, the RCA laboratories of the early 1980s that I was working at, the management there, they wanted to show this all off. So they brought in Bill Gates. So Bill Gates, he's wearing his, you know, like little, sort of dressed down clothes, but everybody else is wearing blue IBM suits, even though they were at Microsoft. So they brought in Bill Gates, they showed him through the entire place, and everybody was bragging. We also had Mike Markula came through. He actually looked at one of my programs, which I'll tell you a little bit about, for annotating music using a computer. And then, of course, they stole those ideas, too. I mean, it was really a ridiculous time where we were very frustrated in working at RCA Laboratories because all of our ideas were going out the front door every time they invited one of these people in. I don't know what they thought. Would they want to partner with us and our lousy machine with the software that wasn't really running completely well? I don't know. But in any event, that was really what was going on. So here's where we come to a point where you and I actually have a connection. In 1980, you won a Space Invaders contest, okay? There you go, right, exactly. So one of my colleagues there at RCA Laboratories, a guy by the name of Mike Keith, he's really very involved with the number pi. He's written an entire book in Pi-lish. You can look that up online. So Mike Keith at the time, he and I were sharing an office with another guy, and he was really interested in Space Invaders. So he had one running constantly on his computer. And so at the Trenton Computer Festival, some of you know about the early Trenton Computer Festival, they had a competition. This is next year. So they decided to have a competition for a Space Invaders contest. So this is 1981. So I was not that up to speed on Space Invaders, but Mike Keith was. So I said, look, Mike, if you can win the Space Invaders contest, the award was an Apple II. So brand new in the box. I said, I'll buy it off of you. So he had motivation to win, which he did win. So he definitely won it. And so that was what became my home computer that I was able to work on the side and take some of the stuff that RCA Labs really wasn't ever going to use for their personal computer, which eventually just crashed and burned. They never actually brought it to market. But I was able to get the software that I was doing up and running on the Apple II computer. And again, stupidly enough, RCA signed off on it. They gave me the rights to patent it, do copyrights on it or whatever. Even though it had been originally done at RCA, they didn't care about it. And so they just basically, you know, their attorney signed off on it. And so that was eventually became Notable Software. Now, I was very impressed that they actually took our logo of Notable Software, which has existed since the early 1980s, and put this on this great badge, specialized badge for today. So I was just shocked to see that they did this. So now what I'm going to show you is what Mike, Keith, and I decided to do on our own, again, just sort of running in the background. And so we created a number of different products. So here was we didn't have a website at the time. This was later. So later we had a website, and let me just shrink this down a little bit. And so the products that we were working on, again, just transferring them to the Apple II, were called Note Trespassing, Musical Matchup, Flags of the World, and Geography Scramble. So we had these 4 video games. That's what we were working on, still on my Notable Software website. So what happened after that was we basically decided that we were going to create a seminar where we could teach people how to write computer programs that were educational. And so that's what these programs actually were. But let me show you first, before we get to that, I'll show you I hired an artist to do some really cool, and back in the day, whoops, sorry about that, whoops. Come on, make it smaller. Here we go. Oops, it's not wanting to show it. Aw, come on. I don't know what's going on here. Let me make it small. I don't know why that's not showing. Let me try the Geography Scramble one. For some reason, oh, maybe I have to go here. So it should be able to make it a little bit smaller. There we go. So we hired someone to do these. Back in the day, the commercial advertising of your software didn't have to be very realistic because we knew nothing was going to look like that on the screen. So it didn't look like that. It looked more like the stuff you just showed. So that was that. And no trespassing. So it was like, you know, learn about geography, basic types of stuff like that. And no trespassing, which is our very most popular game. Let me see if I can shrink that one up. Oops, come on. There he is. Go down a little bit. Oh, no, he just doesn't want to show. I'll try to, here we go. So again, it didn't look like that at all. It was just a staff, and notes would come across. And what you had to do, so each of these games, what you had to do to create them was that I was running them in Apple Basic on the Apple II, but we also had to write routines in assembly language to make the music fast enough. You could not write in BASIC in order to run these as fast as these notes were coming across on the screen. And just like any type of shoot it down type of thing, as you would identify the proper notes, they would go away, they'd make a booping sound, things like that. And so we had a number of sort of tricks in assembly language. If you wanted to create a chord, you would arpeggiate it because there were no interrupts. So you had to actually do it as do-do-do, something like that, you know, like a triplet, and you couldn't actually play an actual chord on the early computers. And the other situation with the Apple was it was all square waves. So it really sounded pretty tinny, sort of bad, but it was great. I mean, it was actually very popular. It got into a number of computing magazines. We got an award for one of the programs that we wrote. And so that's basically what we were trying to do, was to come up with educational ways of creating games that people could learn about music, geography, things like that. So what came out of that next was having an educational computer programming seminar. So here's actually found this past week. So this was the binder of the educational programming seminar. We thought we could run a seminar and get 100 people like this room here to show up. I think we had 8, and then we got a bunch of our friends to show up for free to make it look less stupid. So this was the educational computer programming course that Mike and I were lecturing at to teach people how to write these computer games. So let me show you some of the other things in here. So it just said what you could do, types of stuff like this. There's the outline of the seminar, how to register. And again, it was somewhat of a flop. But what I find interesting about this, in looking back on it, and I want to read you this from the actual manual that we gave out. This was our conclusions, the very last slides of our seminar. The future of educational computing. So again, remember, this was like 1983 when we were doing this. Again, I worked at RCA Labs through 1985. I jumped out just before they completely collapsed and started doing other things. But, you know, it was sort of a disastrous situation for RCA in general. But this is what we said for the future of educational computing in 1983. New programming styles will be developed. Natural programming languages will be created. Artificial intelligence studies will provide us with information about the way that people think. This is 83. This is the future. We projected this. Networking of computers with large databases will give us instant access to vast amounts of information. The learning experience will become far more personalized. Availability of inexpensive computers will raise the education level of lower income groups. That may not have really happened. And this really ambitious one, computer technology will help to break the barriers of race, sex, age, language, and personal handicaps. Maybe. But anyway, that was our optimism, and we concluded by saying, we hope to help make these things happen. Won't you join us? And that was the goal of our educational computer programming seminar. So you can see where we were at. Here is where we are now. It sort of gives me the willies to think about. I did not remember that we had written that page, but it's so, yeah, the AI. I mean, it was all there. So anyway, so I'm going to leave you with that and turn it over to Becky so she can give her part of the history.
My part of the history is weird. First, starting off in the early 70s with an Apple II that fell off the truck and was able to be purchased by me for $600 because I didn't ask where it came from, and if I did, I would probably be serving some time in jail. Penny saver, thank you so much. But of course, today we call that Craigslist or eBay. But, you know, back in the 70s, things were a bit different. You know, you had to dial a phone with a literal actual dial, things like that. But of course, using that at Apple II in 1978, I think is when I got it. I then used it to reverse engineer the Atari 2600 and make cartridges of my own because, you know, text files, modems, and things with forbidden knowledge, you know, like, you know, things like how does a nuclear bomb actually work? Awesome. How to make anthrax in the quietness of your own home, and of course, how to build a bridge or blow up a bridge or everything like that. Just all sorts of wonderful knowledge you can have at your fingertips, and they think they'd get rid of it by the 80s, 90s. Not like you can't just download it today. But because I was collecting every single Atari Sync cartridge known to man by essentially plugging it into one little device to read them in and another device to plug it into an Atari 2600 that was hot wired to a ROM emulator and played every single game imaginable. And I got some mad skills, which then eventually parlayed into winning this thing called the Atari National 2600 Space Invaders Tournament.
Yes.
Which I won't go into the details because I already went through that in the 2022 Vintage Computer Federation East. Just go onto YouTube, watch it, laugh, cry, you'll kiss, $5 goodbye. But after winning that, it gave me my 15 minutes of fame, which then parlayed into the best synchronization of events in the sense that this company called Activision won a lawsuit against a company called Atari, which says, you know, if you reverse engineer the Atari 2600, you can make games for it. So then everybody and their brother made a video game company to make video games. I mean, US Games was formed by Quaker Oats. Every time I think of video games, I think of, oatmeal with this Quaker guy on the cover. Sure, fine, but 20th Century Fox and Parker Brothers. But then there was this company called Avalon Hill, who was known for doing all these board games and then computer game conversions of their board games. And they thought, wouldn't it be cool to put these on the Atari 2600? To which they then asked Electronic Games Magazine, do you know anybody who programs the Atari 2600? And they said, sure, but they'll cost you $250,000 to hire. And it's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't go into the Atari 2600. But we know this kid who reverse engineered the Atari 2600. Maybe you should give her a call. And they called me up, and it says, yep, I made my own dev kits and everything. And they said, can you show up tomorrow morning? I live in Whittier, California, outside of LA, and you're in Baltimore. That's what planes are invented for. So literally after that phone call, I was, within 24 hours, sitting at some place in Towson, Maryland, going to Radio Shack and buying all the wire wrap I could carry and started building Atari 2600 dev kits. To which then I taught them all how to program the Atari 2600. And next thing you know, games like London Blitz and Out of Control and so forth all existed because I taught them how to program the 2600. But then, as time went on, ended up at a company called Boone, where we were doing, in that case, Atari 2600 to VIC-20 and Commodore 64 ports, which is how I ended up doing Chuck Norris Super Kicks and Robin Hood for Zonix, which, yet again, another company, K-Tel Records. They're not around anymore, but a record company thought, maybe we should make video games. Quaker Oats could do it. I mean, come on. So why can't, there be synergy between making, music collections that they do on, for 4 payments of $9.95, we could make, video game cartridges. Sure, why not? So I did a bunch of games for them through Boone, to which one day Boone folded, and then the survivors of the layoffs all sat around a table and we were like, what do you want to do? Let's make a video game company. Yeah. I got nothing better to do. That's how Interplay was formed. So it's like, okay. And that's where I got famous for doing games like Bard's Tale 3, The Thief of Fate, Dragon Wars, Mind Shadow, Tracer Sanction, Borrowed Time, Task Times in Tone Town, and then just doing so many ports that I'm like, my name is on over 300 games because they said, hey, we need a game to port over in a couple of weeks. Story of my life. Hey, heard this game called Racing Destruction Set? It's on the Commodore 64, and Electronic Arts wants us to do it on the Atari 800. And I said, I'll put it in the long pile I got to do. And sure enough, I did that port in a couple of weeks and did another port in a couple of weeks. Heck, Interplay was constantly running out of money. From the day we were founded to the day they actually imploded. I did things like printer drivers. I did CPM ports. I did copy protection systems in which I wrote software that actually drove those copy disk devices. These are all things I did in the background just to make money so that Interplay could make their, stay alive. It was a thankless job, but when you're working at your own company and so forth, it's things you do. But as time went on, did more games, help create a thing called Mac Play at Interplay, where I did like 30 Mac ports. I mean, Wolfenstein 3D, you're welcome.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I did Wolfenstein 3D on 3DO, which then said, ooh, you do id games on 3DO, which then I went burned in hell doing Doom. That's another YouTube video you gotta watch. But parlayed to modern day, in which I still have, I'm doing a company called Old School, where we've been doing PlayStation, Xbox, Switch games now. But I never lost my nostalgia for vintage computers. So if you ever came to my garage, I have more than enough Power Mac G5s and stuff. It's just, and enough Apple IIs to fill a classroom. But, so at least I know what I'm going to do when I do finally retire is I'll be making more Apple II games and stuff because, let's face it, I can't really make money today making Apple II games, but, when you're living on Social Security, then maybe I could. Anyways, I think that's about enough of time wasting I'll do here. Let's go ahead and start the roundtable.
That was fantastic.
Oh, hi, yeah. Well,
That was excellent.
I was just wondering if you come back to me because it comes full circle.
Yeah, if you want to come full circle,
Yeah.
let me just change the screen so everybody doesn't have to keep looking at my stupid icons.
There we go.
This is an icon of the Sarnoff collection, which is at the College of New Jersey, and we're trying to get a grant to renovate the Sarnoff collection so that we'll also have a amateur radio station there. And how many of you here have a amateur radio license? Quite a few. And for those who do not, there's a form over on the side, and we offer free classes for people to get their technician license. It's called the Moore Project. We have a grant for this. If you run out, come and see me. I have more flyers in my briefcase. And the Moore Project for amateur radio is largely intended to raise the demographics of amateur radio operators, include youth and also non-males, but just 50%. The other 50% can be people of any age and gender. So the idea is that the grant was to intend to encourage youth and non-males to get involved with amateur radio. So it's really great, and I just wanted to. Yes, and free equipment. Yes, you all, everybody who licenses with it gets an actual handheld amateur radio. Works on 2 meters and 70 centimeters, and you would get your license, and we pay for the licensing and the testing fee as well. So you just look up for the Moore Project online, or just take the flyer, or come and see me. I have business cards. So I just want to bring that around, and we'll just leave that up. It's a nicer thing than looking at my icons. Go right ahead.
And this worked out really good.
Yeah, it was
right?
great. It was
Because
a full circle. Yeah.
It brings up that everyone seems to assume that, of course, you do video games with computers. In fact, Becky's saying, hey, everyone said, of course, it's a moneymaker, let's get in. And of course, they discovered it's harder than that. But they were all pre-sold on it. I'd just like to point out that when RCA did the VIP instruction manual, and Dad came home and said, okay, so they put it out to everybody at RCA who's working on this. They're looking for programs to put in the back. Because I pointed out, you can't have a hardware development kit without sample programs. So as soon as you build it, you can run them and make sure everything works and have something to show before you start learning how to program. And I said, okay, anyone who wants will submit programs for it. And he said, and then we submitted games, and they said, no, we don't want games in the VIP instruction manual. Who would put games in a hardware development kit and meant for companies to buy so they can run training programs for their engineers so they can learn how to embed a microprocessor into their industrial equipment? Because that's what this is. This isn't a computer project. We're out of the computer division. This is another part that we can sell in large quantities. Now, this is a little problem for my father because the entire point of this is you can't have a hobby kit cheap unless someone goes into mass production with a microprocessor. Because he'd been trying to design things since the late 50s with as few transistors as possible so you could buy everything yourself and build a real working computer. And thank goodness he lived in the right time, and LSI got there fast enough that he didn't have to figure out how to do it anymore. He just had to take his hobbyist computer design and expand it a little bit so it's useful as a microcontroller for industrial equipment. And he said, wow, RCA's doing it, this is great. And it comes to actually putting the games in, and they don't want to do it. They're dead set against it.
Right.
Okay? And the reason is, company training programs will not take us seriously if there are games with it. They'll think it's a hobbyist system. Heaven forbid.
Remember when I said about Mac Play? I had so many fights with Apple because one year they'd be, we love games. Next year, business software, go away.
Yes.
Then a year later, we want games. It's like,
Yes.
Right.
okay, it's nice. Now I know how to live with a schizophrenic.
Right.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
they decide, their mind's made up. And but my father's argument was, well, wait a minute. You're going to spend a lot of money sending salesmen around to convince large equipment manufacturers that they should start an in-house training program to add the expense of microprocessors into it that in the long term will save them money by designing around custom logic. He said, that's going to be a hard sell. And you're not going to sell large quantities of parts unless people can use them. So if you put games in, it's not aimed at the hobbyist. It's aimed at the professional engineer who works with industrial equipment, who sees that the future is embedded microprocessors and wants to get in on it, who works with a company who doesn't want to shell out the money for a training program. So if you do it as a self-study kit, then you can get that, and it's cheap enough. They'll buy it on their own. They'll learn it. They'll try to convince their company to do it, and then they will, of course, order from you because they know how to use the 1802 and they don't know how to use anyone else's microprocessor. So this is your cheapest way to get to volume sales of an 1802. And they bought it. Because they couldn't imagine that grown men would have the hobby of a microprocessor. The point was, if they buy on their own money and have it at home, and they want to show their wife and their kids what they do, they're not going to have a logic probe software. Okay? They want a game, something recognizable to the layman, so they can show it off and justify the price, and they bought it. And the rest is history, because I think everyone here knows that there was a VIP games manual later, and then a games manual too. That was all right in. RCA was surprised. People started writing in to marketing in Lancaster and saying, hey, I'm really having fun. Built the VIP kit. I'm having fun with the games. Got any more games I can buy? Game listings, not even games. Just, hey, $5, you got another 10 game listings? They had so many people asking for it, they decided, well, let's make a games manual then. So I got 2 games into the VIP instruction manual. I got 2 games into the Studio 2, and I got 3 games into the VIP games manual.
Nice.
And they proved that people think of computers as an entertainment media, not just as a business tool.
Right.
So just letting you know,
cool.
this was not a surprising turn of events.
Right.
Okay? That RCA didn't want to cheapen the image of the serious hardware development kit, just making a hobby kind of thing and make it mistaken for a hobby computer. And it was the hobbyists who wrote in and demanded more entertainment software. And then when the games manual selling, all of a sudden everyone else who gets in, this was 79 for the first manual, not sure, and shortly after for the second manual, by, you're saying 80, 82, 83.
Right.
Everybody says, wow, computer games. We have to get in on this.
Right.
Well,
And the problem really, I think, with these big legacy companies, and AT&T, I wound up working at AT&T Homedale as well, and that was in the mid-1990s. And there was this short-sightedness that they had this business model, and although what we were working on at AT&T Homedale was we were actually working on what is now Zoom. And it was 3-dimensional, it was holophonic, because again, I was working on the audio part, so you could hear, you still can't get that on any of your Zooms, where you position the people around a table and they're all actually seen there, it was actual graphics of the individual people. You could see them at a table. You could turn papers around and see what you were working on together. Yeah, it ran on a mainframe computer, but it ran on a gigantic Silicon Graphics and SGI machine. But AT&T, they were very short-sighted. They just couldn't. They wouldn't even let us patent it because they were like, we're not going to waste our money on patenting this. It's like, hello. So yeah. So I did work on that. We got some really great papers out of that, but that was it. It was just these companies really were very short-sighted.
Yeah, talking about short-sightedness, I remember back in the 80s when the Mac was first introduced, people were like, my Apple II, why would I upgrade to a Mac? Because the Apple II, all these games, so many games. Where's the games on the Mac? And they were like, the Mac is a business computer. It's a writing computer. Why would you want games? Because games. So there's this thing called an IBM, and you know what it's got? Games. So let's go screw the Mac. Let's go over and get games. And then, as time went on, the Mac became the butt of a joke because, I could do word processing, but where's my games? I mean, Shanghai and what was it? Dark Castle, I think, were the only two games that were on the Mac. But then on the PC, you had everything. And it was also on the Apple II, everything. So, of course, when Apple, in their infinite wisdom, decided to hobble the Apple IIgs.
Yes.
Then they came up with the color Mac because people are saying, well, the IIgs has a desktop and it's in color. It was the first one, not on the Mac. It was on the IIgs. So they finally put a color desktop on a Mac. And then this game came out called Crystal Quest, which was on the Mac. And they were saying, look how fast it is. Look how wonderful it is. And this is true. I called up Cassidy and Green Ink and said, can I port that to the IIgs? And they said, sure. And then, of course, within a few months, the game shipped on the IIgs with a big sticker. Runs 4 times faster than the Mac version. I got a lot of hate mail from Apple for that. Because here it is, their Apple IIgs, the computer, they're like, no, don't buy a IIgs for schools. Buy our Mac LC or buy this. But Crystal Quest runs 4 times faster on the Apple IIgs.
That was the other thing. You could also do these tweaks. So as the newer machines came out, you could get better sound. But again, a lot of it was you had to get down in the nitty-gritty and work in assembly language. But you also get more colors out as well. So there was a lot you could do also if you were willing to drill down. And now all those things aren't secret anymore, but a lot of people were doing that to enhance the colors, to enhance the sound, to get more polyphony, to get better sound waves as opposed to just square waves and things like that.
Well, and before we leave the business uses of real computers, okay, I just like a fast survey. I'm telnetting in the 90s on the websites and Centel shareware repositories and discussion groups on Usenet groups and all. And I see someone talking about Colossal Caves and all the different versions. And somebody mentions that it ships with every IBM computer. We've got a Burroughs computer at work at the insurance company. So now I got to find a time to go down to a terminal when nobody else is down there. And I hesitate, I log in, and I wonder if they're going to know what I do because I've logged in. And I say, am I going to do it and risk my job? C-A-V-E.
Oh, no.
Enter. And it's the start of Caves. It's on there. It does ship with every one. So I do 2 little things, 2 commands just to make sure it's not just the screen, and it runs. And then I quick log out, and I don't tell anyone it's there. and no one ever comes around saying, hey, we looked at the log. What the heck were you running on that Cave thing? So I just wondered, did anyone else ever run Cave on a real computer that it shouldn't have been there?
Not Cave, but at the labs, they would give you the Silent 700. Any of you remember that, where you had that cradle? Yep, that cradle mode. You had to sign it out, and you could take it home. And then you were playing with the other RCA people from home. You were playing adventure games, all the,
you
all
play
this
Trek?
stuff. Yeah, Trek. There was Trek. There was definitely Trek, and all this stuff. But it was a silent 700. So, and then you also had the printout capability, which was like this thermal paper that it was spitting out this thermal paper. And then one time it hit my heater and it almost ignited. So it was really bad. But yes, this was, this was what you would do on your off hours at home, but it really wasn't your off hours because you were learning all of this stuff as you were going along doing it.
I just want to make the point that even though real companies didn't want games, people at those real companies were shipping their favorite game with the computers that no one knew about, and then on the internet they're saying, hey, guys,
Right.
it's on every mainframe.
So it was not the internet per se, but you were on the network of your company,
Yeah.
and you were doing this with other people in the other branches.
Yeah, so when people say, there was a time when computers were serious, I don't know when, because Colossal Cave as a text adventure was in the 60s.
Yeah, yeah.
And if it's shipping on IBM 360,
Yep.
pre-installed and nobody knows it,
Yeah.
then it's not like, sometime in the 70s and 80s when all of a sudden game consoles come out, people are adding that's it. And again, it's hobbyists. Hobbyists are sneaking it in, and they figure management has no clue how to tell what's. It's called Cave, for heaven's sakes. What do they think that program's doing on an IBM or a Burroughs mainframe? Does nobody look at what the list of file names
It was
are?
all in there.
It's not like they're hiding it. So hobbyists have always been driving the market. You had to be an insider hobbyist to sneak it in, and it got easier because you could have a letter writing campaign like the RCA and say we want more games. Games are really important to us.
Yeah.
But it's always been the hobbyists driving everything. Even it had to be professionals who are closet hobbyists. And they can't let anyone at work know they're interested, and they're really interested in it. It's not just a job.
Yeah. So we should, unless any of you want to address anything else, we should throw this open to questions from the audience. I'm sure you folks might have some interesting questions. Okay, in the far back. Go ahead.
Games?
Okay. It doesn't have to be about games necessarily.
Uh-oh.
Whoop.
Oh, they're organized. Let them do their job.
There you go.
Dr. Mercuri, education and games and the giving nature of people who create computers and are creative people sparks my interest, and as being involved in academics and things, knowing how young people learn and older people learn. The idea that Easter eggs or things started way back. I never knew that on a mainframe, and I had worked at IBM, that was there. But I'm interested in the future. Back then, you prognosticated or projected. Right now, we have students in school who are learning, with tablet devices, and they're not. They're up to speed on the procedures and things, using procedures to get things done, and creating procedures to get things done. So it's kind of programming before they get programming. But I'm interested in your thoughts on the future of education, given the tools that we have now.
That's a really good point to bring up, and I feel terribly about these surveys and studies that they're doing, saying that during the time of COVID, students lost their ability to read, that they're falling far behind in math and things like that. But there are programs out there. There are ways of getting that type of learning out there. It's just that people are not recognizing that it's accessible, it's out there and it's available. And the teachers need to be doing this. They need to have the ability to recommend these things to the students. You need to have centers, the libraries are doing a lot. But again, there's only so much that can be done, but by facilitating this, even having things on your phones, they're also saying maybe we should go back to, if you're young, you should only use a flip phone. Well, okay, maybe so, but you could still, have reading techniques and, learning math and things like that. I mean, there's a lot that can be done, but for some reason, there just became this sort of dark hole that we all went into for 3 or 4 years where a lot of people didn't learn things. So I'm not quite sure that I really understand what that's all about. But certainly, these educational programs still exist, and there's a lot more that can be done with this. And I think that we need a new generation of people developing the software and tools, putting it out there, and making sure that it's made available into the schools, and that it's usable, that it's something that that a teacher can pick up easily, that a parent can pick up easily. That's why we're doing this amateur radio project. We're basically teaching engineering skills to people from 12 years old and up. And they're learning about it. They're getting their amateur radios. They're getting on the air. I look at it as a way of learning math. They have to know ohms. In order to get your amateur radio license, you need to know Ohm's law and the power law. So they're learning these things. You have to know about how to design a circuit, what the different circuit things are. All of you hams are nodding with me. You know that that's all on the technician exam. And I'm teaching this to 12-year-olds, and I'm doing it all online. It's not just me. We have a whole team of people, amateur radio operators, who are helping out with this. So there's a lot more that can be done. Do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, because you see, the best educational games I've ever sold was, Mario teaches typing. Games.
Yeah.
And of course, who hasn't heard of something called Oregon Trail? Or was it Where in the World is Carmen San Diego?
San Diego, yeah.
What's common?
My nieces and nephews
What's in common with
love
them? Games.
Dino Park, Dinosaur Kart Tycoon, where you ran your own dinosaur zoo. And I go over, and my niece says, I update the game. This dinosaur is dying in a desert thing. She's got 2 dinosaurs. One of them's dying. But she says, but I have to update. I have the receipts. I have to put in something. She's buying more concession stands, more restrooms, and a larger parking lot. And I said, what's your business worth? And she says, $2 million. And I said, I don't know the game, so I'm not sure the business end. I said, is that liquidation value or going concern? Because I don't know how much business they do. She says, that's cash in the bank. And I'm thinking, so I guess it's teaching her that the way you run a successful zoo is, and she's not going to pay for the vet, because if he dies, it's cheaper to just buy another dinosaur. And I said, she's 11 years old. And I'm thinking, I think this game is teaching you how to run a business, but the way it's structured in the simulation is sort of rewarding really callous behavior, and you could have put the rules in, so unless you take good care of your animals, people boycott and don't come, as opposed they'll come to see a half-dead dinosaur as long as there's no line at the restroom and plenty of parking. So children do learn from these simulations, so you have to be careful what the simulation rewards.
And that's the thing. I really think that we could be doing a lot more with this, and you folks who are out there, you should be encouraging this. Encourage it in the schools, encourage it with your kids, your grandkids, and just be encouraging it. One of the things we're doing in the Moore Project is we're very happy to have teams. So it's like a parent and their kids, and they're all taking amateur radio licensing together. So eventually they're all going to get their radios and they're all going to be on the air together. So it's, doing this as a family unit and doing it as school units, I think it's a great opportunity to get involved with this sort of stuff and turn this whole aspect around that, people are saying they can't read and people are saying they can't do math. They can do it. It just needs to be presented in a palatable way.
Yeah. And I have the opposite take on it. I think COVID actually was a great boon. We just won't see it for another 10 years. Because it got computers and internet access in the hands of a lot of kids who never would have.
Yes.
So it's not the educational games, it's actually the real educational stuff. It's the YouTube videos, it's the self-study, it's the real traditional lessons that are on the internet.
And the sheer number of kids who have Roblox accounts.
Right.
Yes.
And,
yes.
But what happened, my theory is in 10 years, you're going to see a major change in literacy and education. Because now that the schools had to have online learning.
Yes. Yeah.
Kids who never would, they would have been blocked. Now, those kids aren't benefiting so much because you don't have to, But they have younger brothers and sisters, they have younger cousins, they have younger people in the neighborhood. When they're struggling in school in future years, they're going to say, oh, I can help you. I can find a YouTube video that explains that concept better than the teacher does.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And people will be able to make up for the shortcomings in whatever school they're in, because some family
Picking up
members
this
going to say,
information.
oh, yeah, I did that when
Right.
I was a kid. They're out there. Why don't you just look for this and just watch them go through it, and you'll get it. And you're not going to see that right away, because the kids who were doing it at home didn't really appreciate it. But when they get out in the real world, they're going to help younger people they know who are struggling with lessons to stay in school and finish.
It'll have a
And
ripple
it
effect,
bypasses the limitations of the school system. And why, I think really why the computers didn't change things in education up till now is because people weren't online.
Right, right.
Okay, unless they valued education. And then it discourages the parents, because if you value education, your kid's going to go online and play online games. So you really want to limit it. But in the future, more kids now know when they talk to the younger kids, they say, oh yeah, there are YouTube videos that you can just look and learn it yourself.
Go
Well,
ahead.
one thing about the internet and education right now is the fact that since almost all kids under the age of, from 10 onwards have access to the internet of some form, that like my grandson was asking, hey, these Republicans are trying to ban this book. Says, okay, why don't you Google the book, read the book? So they did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So now it's
that's what I
like,
mean.
hey, let's go ahead and download all these books because they're forbidden.
Yeah, right. You needed a critical mass of young people discovering what useful resources are out
going,
there, as
yeah.
opposed to just the trendy education. And I think COVID pushed them into it by the schools giving them assignments to say, go find something useful on the internet and do it.
Right, and they're doing it. Questions. There's got to be more questions. Go ahead.
Just a moment.
Yep. There you go.
Regarding the homebrew Atari dev kit, could you please talk about the hardware details of it, and did it have a configurable mapper for rather large ROM files? Thank you.
Okay, the dev kit that I designed was called Sluggo because at the time, Saturday Night Live was doing a thing called Mr. Bill. And since I was, went by a certain name, I said, hey, this dev kit's going to be mean to my Atari 2600, so it's going to be mean to me. So hence its name was Sluggo. The original Sluggo was designed around the basis of the Apple II integer card. So if you ever open the Apple II Red Book, there's a schematic in there on how to build the integer card. All I did was I added a read-write line and 74 LS245 bidirectional ports in order to allow me to either have instead of using ROMs exclusively, I had 6116 static RAM. But the board basically is that design. Only a few lines were changed. That is what the basis of the Sluggo 1 was. Then, of course, since it only needed, the Apple II integer card only had 4K. Actually, was it 4K or 8K? No, it was 8K. 8K was essentially the maximum you could do on an Atari 2600. Essentially 4K if it's normal, 8K if it's bank switched. And at the time, that was not a limitation. In time, I then designed a thing called a Sluggo 2, which was a much larger dev kit, but it too was a board that sit in your Apple II. But when we started going into the Nintendo 8-bit, that's where I did the final version, which was called the Sluggo 3. The Sluggo 3 was a chassis that sat outside of your PC or Apple II. In order to make it work with both of them, I had a parallel port connection. So you either plugged into an Apple II bidirectional printer card, or you plugged into your PC bidirectional printer port. With the same software, I wrote it for both machines. It would then allow you to upload up to 512K of data split into two 256K banks, and I'm talking 256K bytes, not bits. The Sluggo 2 Sluggo 3 had two cables sticking out of it in order to have two completely independent 8-bit ROMs. And the reason of this design was that the Nintendo 8-bit used two simultaneous 8-bit ROMs. One was your character ROM, one was your program ROM. So therefore, you would then plug it in what I called a personality module. It was literally a circuit board where you plug your Sluggo 3 cables into it. It then plugs into a Nintendo 8-bit, and then you were able to create Nintendo 8-bit games. We did Rad Gravity, we did Star Trek 25th Anniversary, those kind of games at Interplay using this dev kit. But then, later on, when it was 16-bit, like the Genesis, well, the two cables became the first high and the low of the 16-bit. So I just made a personality module, made a slight change to the uploading code to basically take all the low bytes, put it here, the high bytes went there. I didn't change anything else as a Sluggo. And with that, I was able to then do Sega Genesis games and other 16-bit ROMs. But through personality modules, I made modules for the Atari 2600. I made one for the Intellivision. I made one for the Nintendo 8-bit, and the Commodore 64, the VIC-20, and the Atari 800. But the Sluggo 3 was the same unit. I just plugged the appropriate module, plugged it in, and that's it. I have like about 3 of the Sluggo 3s still in my garage. But of course, if I was to make a new one, I'd make a Sluggo 4 with using more modern parts, but it would still use the same design with personality modules. It's on my to-do list, so hopefully one day I may end up making enough money on Patreon, I can retire immediately, and then I can bless you with Sluggo 4.
And it brings up the topic of the open architecture and the ability for these early machines that you had these ports, these card slots that you could design cards for. Now, when you worked at a place like RCA or Bell Labs, they would refer to this as a G job. I never did know what the G stood for. But if you were going to design a card for something that had nothing to do with work, really, you could get time in some of these other, the laboratories where you were doing fabrications, where they had whole perf machines and things like that. So you could actually lay out your design for what the card was going to be, drill the holes, and then you could plug in and solder together using a hand soldering tool, all of the parts and components. And I did that a lot. A lot of us would do this. Again, this was another side time that you had to do, which was not between your regular 9 to 5 hours, but you could stay late and do it. Or do some of this work on your lunch breaks. And so these, the fact that these machines are all sealed up, everything is wave soldered, you can't get to anything, it's just all, together in one box, and it's very difficult to get stuff that you can actually work on now. It's not really, that's just not the modality. Maybe we'll see a full swing around again to where more machines are being sold that are open and allow that type of experimentation. I think that would be a great advance again.
It would be nice, but I do know Sluggo 4 would definitely be using a USB port instead of parallel port.
There you go. Okay, and so that's it. Excellent. Other questions?
Thank you. I'm loving this roundtable. Thanks, all of you, for coming.
You're welcome.
Dr. Mercuri, you mentioned polyphonic, and I know all 3 of you have done some interesting stuff with electronic music, with microprocessors, and even earlier machines, minis and mainframes even. Could each of you speak a little bit about your history with electronic music and what you learned from it?
Who wants to go first?
So the question about electronic music?
Well, yeah, sound synthesis, that sort of thing. Some of the games have.
Okay, well, let's see. I had to figure out how to do electronic music on an Apple II, where you touch this one port, which causes the speaker to go in. You touch it again, it goes out, and that's literally everything. And so you have to time it precisely. But of course, with Bard's Tale 1 and 2, the music was just playing a single note at a time. And of course, we had to do it in short bursts, because when you're doing the sound, you can't do anything else. But then when I did Bard's Tale 3, I did a polyphonic sound generator where I actually do 2 square waves of different frequencies at the same time using MFM. So therefore, when you were listening to Bard's Tale 3's music on the Apple II, you're like, wait a minute, there's chords going on.
Right.
How is that happening? But ancient Chinese secret. But of course, things like learning what middle A was, 440 hertz, and then this 12th root of 2 to determine the thing. These are all the mathematicals, because when I was learning music, I was learning it from a purely programming mathematical form. because like what I was saying, the 12th root of 2 is that you have 12 notes in an octave. Each octave is essentially the doubling of frequencies between, so A of one octave, an A of a one higher octave is just the frequency doubled. The next higher is doubled again. But every individual key is just, you take that frequency, multiply it by the 12th root of 2, that frequency is the next one. Multiply by the 12th root of 2 again, keep going, and that's how you get every single frequency of the entire scale till you get back to A. So these are the things I had to learn in order to get the numbers I needed in order to play the appropriate frequencies on the SID chip, the Atari chip, the Apple II, whatever. And of course, then later on, I learned how to play the piano, learned how to play the synthesizer, so forth. So then I started composing my own music. But of course, I was always going with I know exactly the frequencies, I know the pitch, I know this. So I went from a mathematical standpoint, not like, say, somebody who learned it traditionally by strumming the guitar or so forth.
Right, so you're not really thinking of those as individual, when you're programming it, you're not thinking of those as individual notes, because you couldn't get the individual notes. You're creating a wave shape that has the components of all of those partials. So it's not like when you just play a C, if you're just playing just the frequency of, or A440. If you're just playing that frequency, that's not what an instrument is playing. It's also playing those upper partials too that you get out to get a better sound as well. But if you want to play multiple notes at the same time, you need to create a wave shape is what you're really creating, or pulses, if it's only square waves, but you're basically creating a wave shape that would be polyphonic, but you're not. You're creating it mathematically. So you explained it perfectly.
Yeah,
It's
and of course,
really good.
with the Apple II, I don't have things like the envelope, whereas the
Right.
Atari and the C64 and other things, where it's known as attack, decay,
Okay.
sustain, release.
Right.
And because each instrument has its own different envelope, and then you have to apply that to whatever the tone is, so that therefore, you hit the attack, so it's an instant volume up, but then it starts to decay, then it has to sustain, then when the note's over, it doesn't end immediately, it releases. And every single type of instrument has a completely different ADSR, or attack, decay, sustain, relief, and you have to program them as well. And of course, when I went to the Apple II GS, there you have to do true digital music where you're taking all the different waveforms, you add them together, you then put them out, and that's how you do all the mixing. But of course, even a single instrument is polyphonic, in which I had to do 3 to 4 waveforms mashed together at the same time just to play one single note. Because you've got echo, reverb, volume control, location, and these are all things I had to add to the math to play back the music, which is why when you listen to the music in Bard's Tale 3 for the Apple II, while it's polyphonic, it's nice, but when you listen to the soundtrack of Bard's Tale 1 for the Apple II GS, it's a symphony orchestra.
Yeah. And also those partials, they're different for the different instruments and the attacks and decays. So like for a plucked instrument like the guitar, it's a very short, like quick and a quick release. But for, an instrument like the violin, you have, the sound sort of evolves as you're, playing the note and things like that. So there's a lot involved with that. Again, being at RCA, one of the reasons I wanted to go to RCA was there was a fellow by the name of, what the heck, I get his name, I'm blanking on his name. He was the guy who created the RCA synthesizer. And I'll remember his name in a minute. But anyway, he had written a number of books about exactly that. And so he was working at the RCA labs doing, creating the RCA synthesizer. Herbert Ballar was with him, and it was Harry Olson. How could I forget him? He was also a key member of the Audio Engineering Society, like a fellow of the Audio Engineering Society, one of the main guys there. And he was spearheading the whole idea of creating a synthesized instrument that would maybe, maybe RCA was interested in it because it would replace orchestras and you wouldn't have to hire, people to play in a symphony orchestra to do that type of music. But it never really caught on in that way. But Harry Olson, I really, I didn't really get to meet him. I did go to his funeral. So I had that opportunity and I did get to see him there in that state, but I didn't get to see him as in his live persona. But many of his books, the Harry Olson books, about all of that math that you were just talking about, Harry Olson was one of the early people who were laying out all of these different things about the different musical instruments, attack, decay, sustain, release, and things like that, envelopes.
And yeah, and now
Yes, the Philadelphia Music Festival. Yeah, I was involved with that. And early on, I actually saw an ad for it or it's just like a little blurb about it in the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm like, oh, I got to go to this. So yeah, there was a bunch of synthesizer things. Every year they would have something going on, and unfortunately that group no longer exists. PAX, the Philadelphia Area Computer Society, was sponsoring it.
And now we return you to a more distant time in the great past, where, as my father said, he went into digital electronics because the only math you needed was to count up to 1, starting from 0. And the only other skill was really accurate timing diagrams. And so at the Computer Music Festival, more than half of the music presented was on a VIP.
That's right, on
with a
the
soundboard.
VIP. That's
with
right,
a soundboard.
that's correct.
And a lot of the other music
correct.
was actually offline, where they did the calculations on larger computers, and then they actually fed it through to make the sounds. So it was not real time. People actually brought their VIP and performed it there. Hoytson van der Waal, who was an engineer at the labs, he could play the flute, the classical flute. So he programmed a 2-tone music, and he played the flute accompaniment to it live. If you want to learn about how the audio works, the VIP and a sound card, the sound card actually can make 2 actual channels at once. And from my point of view, the interesting part of that was not the music. It was that I'd read or seen on a documentary on PBS that the reason mynah birds and parrots sound like they're speaking is because they can produce 2 separate pure tones at the same time.
Wow.
And to them, your speaking is just another complicated bird song with really long notes instead of a lot of short ones. And if you produce 2 sine waves, their combined envelope can sound like speech. So I said, wow, yeah, I would do artificial speech on it. But I was going off to college in '76, so I didn't have time to play with it. But if you want to experiment and learn from scratch before you get into all
Get
the
into
math
the
behind
more
and
complicated
creating the
math,
signal
yeah.
processing envelopes and the heavy-duty signal processing.
Right.
things. Again, for learning, a VIP with a sound card, and you can experiment with digital voice or with, as you were saying, if you manually shape the envelope to look like multiple notes are playing with all the effects, you can do that manually. Or you can take 2 pure tones and play with changing them solely for the point of making it sound like not 2 notes being played and other effects. And in a nod to Bernie, I will mention Lissajous figures, okay? Because you can essentially do the audio equivalent of having 2 sine waves, one of which controls the other, but audibly rather than visually.
Right.
And-
There's a recording of there's a record, there was an LP. Bill Mockley, who was here earlier, but I don't think he came back for this talk, but Bill Mockley was involved with it, and a number of other people involved with the Philadelphia Area Computer
and
Society.
David All
You
was
can find
selling.
all that online.
Yeah.
It's all documented. And a colleague of mine by the name of Kevin Meredith actually created a video of interviewing me and a number of other people, sort of reminiscing about Harry Olson and a lot of the early computer music stuff that he was doing at RCA.
And Joyce, you even nodded to me about this and you figures. Just to expand on that, my VIP, I had the super sound. Super soundboard, 2 channels, and from each channel I drove a small speaker with a first surface mirror, super glue or rubber cemented to each one, mounted at roughly right angles, and I bounced a helium neon laser. This is like early 80s. Against it and painted Lissajou patterns on a wall. And it was very popular with some garage bands that invited me, showed this thing. It was blowing everybody's minds because that wasn't generally possible. But the VIP and Super Soundboard made that all possible, and it just blew people's minds.
Nice. Any other questions or comments or anything? Come on, there's got to be more questions.
We got one over
There's
there.
one over there, okay. A Commodore guy.
What are your experiences and opinions about code golf?
About what?
What?
Code golf.
I still don't know what that is.
Code golf is where you minimize the time and the number of instructions to the minimum, like to make your program shorter and faster.
Oh,
You mean
I-
code optimization?
Oh, code
Yeah.
optimization.
I'm
Well,
sorry.
you had to do that because the amount of memory that you had was like negligible.
I didn't know they had a name because what else would you distinguish from when you have 2K?
Right. I remember for some of our early
It was called
programs,
programming in my
yes,
day.
some of our early programs for notable software, in order to fit them in the amount of space, we had to abbreviate the copyright notice to COPYR period in order to get a couple of extra bytes out. So yes, there was a lot of code optimization. And if you could take little snippets of code and then like call it as a function, I mean, so yeah, there was a lot. I mean, back in the day, there was no memory. So, I mean, you had to be as optimized as possible.
In the 6502, the bit instruction was used quite often for me to squeeze code together because it was a 1-byte no-op and allowed me to skip 1 or 2 bytes that I didn't want to execute.
Yeah.
There was so many things I had to deal with in code optimization, both in getting the speed up, but the real key, especially like with the Atari 2600, is ROMs I had to work with was 2K, and the idea is that once you ran out of space on the ROM, the game was done. You had to figure out how to squeeze that last little feature by saying, ooh, if I only had 4 more bytes, well, maybe if I used this instruction or did this, or, oh, wait, when I enter this function, I'm always with the carry flag clear. Therefore, I can remove this clear carry before an add instruction.
Yeah.
Little
That was
kooky things.
constant like juggling with, can I do this? And yeah, I mean, when you finally got down to the end and you really wanted to squeeze all those extra features.
Whereas now today, I'm mostly having to look at the output of my C compiler to see where it was dumb and rearrange my C code so it's actually very simple and almost like I'm writing an assembly except in C, so that when I look at the output from the compiler, it actually looks like, yeah, I would have written it this way in assembly, use everything in registers and stuff, because, PowerPC had load, hit, store. But the code optimization is just as good as it is, or just as important today as it is back then. In fact, even more so, because if you don't know what your C compiler is spitting out, it's pretty bad.
You use up a lot of resources much faster than you used to.
Oh
Yep.
yeah.
And of
yeah,
course,
yeah.
people are writing stuff now in C# and Python and in some cases Rust. And I look at the output of the compiler and go like, you like these languages?
You're getting further
What's
and
wrong
further
with
away,
you?
yeah.
But
The machines are faster and there's more memory, so we can get more sloppy. But it's just, that was a good question. I mean, I like these questions because it's sort of bringing me back to, oh yeah, we had to do that too. So,
And I like to say on the Speedway game for the Studio 2, when I first did, I was getting, the contract with RCA said $5 an hour, minimum wage was $2.50. So my on-campus job at college the next year was going to be $2 an hour. So $5 an hour, but a maximum of 50 hours. So a maximum of $250.
right.
So I figure out how to do a really interesting game that I can tick off the box called Car Race, though people may not get what they expect out of it. And then I'm playtesting it, and it is slow as molasses. This is fast. If you go out to Josh's exhibit, to the 1802, and play the Speedway, you're going to think it's slow. That is blazingly fast compared to the first version. Okay? I wound up making like 75 cents an hour for how long this thing took to completely rewrite. Because now it works, but it's so slow, what good is it? So I had
And
to rewrite the
remember,
whole
a
thing.
semester at Penn State was $200, so
Yeah, well-
you could earn all that in
It was a little more than Rider University.
Working your way
So
through
I-
college, how quaint.
So I rewrote it from scratch, optimizing everything for speed. And along the way, I wound up using hardly any memory because I was a big fan on Usenet newsgroups and internet, before there was an internet, Telnet and Michael Abrash was doing all his tricks on getting as much graphics performance out as possible. I'm reading those tutorials and seeing stuff. And he had a thing, loop unrolling, where you don't put a loop in, you actually write that many times the instructions for sure thing. And there was a whole discussion about when is it effective and when not. I mean, if you do it 20 times, it probably isn't, but if you do it 3 times, it's better just write them out because it just goes through it faster. And at some point in the discussion, he says, but of course, the fastest code is the instruction you don't have to execute. So I went through and I streamlined the thing so that it didn't do checks where it had to and just assumed you weren't polling every screen update. Because, hey, it's slow and your action time's slow. It's not going to make that much difference. When I was done, it only used up 2/3 of the 2K of memory, and it was fast. Right. So when you said
2K.
That was a lot.
Wow.
yes,
A lot.
I know.
And a whopping 2K.
That's why I had so much space left over when you optimize it, because I was eliminating instructions that weren't necessary. Because, it's fast enough to poll once in a while.
But
But
it's
when you
great
said
that they
feature
can,
creep, you said
yes,
feature creep.
fe-
Now,
feature
I'm
creep
sitting
and
there
feature
saying,
creep.
okay, I'm going to submit this game, and they have to like it or I don't get paid. And the whole point of doing it was I like to work in computer games, and they're actually going to pay you so you can put it on your resume. I got paid for it as opposed to like my name's in the instruction book because I hit it, and well, hey, they didn't pay you for it, so of course you got it in.
Right.
So I really want them to accept this. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, man, management's going to look at that listing and realize it stops way shorter than all the other games being submitted. And they're going to say, well, could you add something to it? You have a plain space. I took everything else so it runs faster. No, I cannot add any features
No
back
more
in. That was the whole
space.
point.
There was no more space.
So I decided, well, I have to hide the fact that it was so small. So I thought, I'll put a bonus game in. Something that's too stupid no one would buy on their own, but I have the space for something small, and I thought, well, what have I got I can put in without adding code? I thought, ooh, car race. I can move sprites around, and I can detect collisions. Let's get rid of the track and make it tag, and then every 10 seconds, whoever's it changes. So the strategy is you want to catch the other person, but as your time is going, you try to judge how much time, because there's no timer on it. You want to be as far away as possible when the switch happens. So I figured that'll make it a little interesting, and it's enough to be a little mini game. That's why it's Speedway Tag. And it worked because they bought it and no one said, well, if they took tag out, could you add like something else to the car race game or something? It worked. So feature creep, hiding the fact that it takes too little memory. And yes, we didn't call it code optimization. It was just getting the darn thing to run.
Right, just
That's
getting it
just
to
what it took.
work in the amount of space.
Back in
and
the
time
good old
available.
days before the early 80s.
before the early 80s. So I know we're sort of running low on time, and so I just wanted each of the three of us to maybe, just say a last few sentences, and I'll let you have the last word because you went last, at the beginning. So we'll go this way again.
I would love to just mention that even though having fun with Speedway cured me of wanting to work for someone else as a game developer, and I went into other things, I've always designed games with artificial intelligence for non-player characters, even in like real business things. When I was with the insurance company as a product development actuary, one of the things was using neural networks for fraud detection. I said, well, I'm familiar with artificial neurons and neuromorphic engineering and all the math behind the statistics and all. Sure, I'll give it a shot. And I realized in looking at it that we didn't have the computer power to do it on a large enough data set. And the whole thing was just to flag potential fraud accurately so that some person didn't have to look through every application for auto insurance. So what I did was I said, well, you know, again, can't pull a real rabbit out of a real hat. They don't really know what a neural network is anyway. It's just a buzzword. So I just did a cluster analysis. It's a lot of math anyway, and they're not going to look in the code. And I realized that if I do a literary analysis of the auto insurance application as if it was the outline for a story, I could assign a genre to it based on the lifestyle portrayed. And if it's in the category of nonfiction, I'll label it truthful. And if it's in the category of fiction, because people don't have 5 kids and drive a two-door sports car. But people who do fraud just fill out anything on those marketing survey lifestyle questions. So I could identify things that didn't fit a standard buying pattern for that make and model car. So that was a work of fiction. I just flagged those as potential fraud. It worked so well that the underwriting department wanted to do it, and the management was never sure it would work into the future, and it wasn't just lucky data set, which again is a neural network problem, overfitting the data. So they thought it was a neural network. They treated it just like it was. Maybe it's overfitting that sample data. They never did it, but that was my literary and drama and artificial intelligence thing. And then when I went back for bachelor's in electrical engineering, because everyone's pirating CD-ROMs, so if I was going to start my own company, it was like, no one pirates bass fishing handheld game. Because no one's going to build you the handheld game just to give you the ROM for it.
Right.
So I said, hey, you need an engineering degree to work on embedded games like that. Saying, I picked up a lot working with my dad, and I'm going to cut it. So I got the BSEE, and I was really into neuromorphic engineering because I went to simulation models of actual nervous systems. So for my senior class electrical engineering project, I did a peak signal detector circuit, which is what I told them it was because, you know, solar power panels were real big around 2000, and it would like guide it and measure the sun. And actually what it was an artificial retina. It was, but I sounded them out when I first went in, and they said, oh no, that's too hard, choose something easier. So I did this, but it was actually a 3-rod retina, all out of op amps, and it had hyper acuity and adapted to the background light level. And yeah, I was really thrilled. I actually built one. All out of op amps so that you could put it on a piece of silicon and have an array of those. So I'll just let you know, there were fun things you can do that still you can't explain to the people you're doing it for that you're doing anything fun with it. And it has to look like just routine. But hobbyists, you can always find a way. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. I just want to say that, you know, as much as I was trashing RCA, it was a really great place to work at. I have lifelong friends from the time that I had there. I learned amazing skills, became an amateur radio operator and all sorts of other things too as well. But it was the best of times and it was the worst of times because you could see that there was this competition, you know, between the East Coast and the West Coast, and that the companies out here were just falling further and further behind. So it was a difficult time. It was not an easy time being a woman in engineering and computer science in any of those locations. I won't say that necessarily I was discriminated against or personally harassed, but it was very clear that I was brought in as an associate member of technical staff. Many very talented women who managed to stay through some of the later years of RCA, and then moved into the next group, SRI, that took over the RCA labs in Princeton. They stayed at that level, talented women with excellent degrees, and they never were advanced to regular member of technical staff or a senior member of technical staff. So for women, it was a tough time. But I personally was able to really enjoy the work that I did. And part of it was going out into creating my own company, which now doesn't do anything as far as writing software is concerned. I'm always reading it and dealing with, I work in computer forensics. So it did teach me how to manage a company. And notable software, actually, I keep the software, but we mostly analyze software, but we don't do anything with writing software right now. But it was a great time. So it was like the best of times, it was the worst of times, but it was a really great time. So I just like to end with that, but go ahead.
Yeah, earlier she was talking about AI and blockchain and stuff, and for me, it's like, ugh. That's just buzzwords. I mean, buzzword bingo. I always get my card punched from hearing buzzwords. So, like right now, the money people are like, AI. Do you use AI? Is this video game driven by AI? And I'm like, yes, yes, it is.
Yes.
Does it? Do you have blockchains for all your purchasable items? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Life lessons learned from Ghostbusters.
Right,
Yes.
If
right,
someone
right.
asks you,
If
then
you're
you
a
say
guy,
yes, whatever
you
the
say
question
yes.
is.
Right,
You
whatever.
say yes, it's using AI. Yes, it's using blockchain.
Right,
Yes, it's using
right,
NFTs.
exactly.
Is it? No. No. I'm not that dumb. Because it's just that nobody who with the money has any knowledge on how to look under the hood. And they're, of course, expecting something from like Tron with all these blinking lights and so forth, not understanding that, no, there's the hamster in the wheel, there's these wires that are holding it together, but it runs, it works. And there's no little blinking lights as much as I want the blinking lights, but these words like blockchain and so forth, like blockchain is anonymous. Yeah, but when you factor in that websites get hacked all the time, which then gets the wallet associated with your email address, now that I know your email address is connected to this wallet, every transaction you've ever done, period, is now traceable to you.
And the cops will find it too. That's what I do in my forensics work.
Yeah, well, see, that was my whole point.
They
Is that people
will.
would think like, oh, the blockchain's totally anonymous, but when you factor in the sheer number of websites that have been compromised or have been taken over by the FBI,
And the number of people who have told me that we should have blockchain voting, who I would like to strangle. You know, it's like, are you crazy?
yeah, are you nuts?
Are you nuts? Are you nuts?
But that's the point, is that every time I hear these buzzwords, I'm going like, if you actually knew how the sausage is made, I could tell you how full of shit you are. But unfortunately, like right now, I'm working on a project in which the people in charge are like AI this and NFT that, and I'm like, yes, yes.
Yes.
Then I turn to my team and say, ignore the man behind the counter. We will do it the right way that will run at 60 frames per second and deliver what he wants, not the buzzwords. It's just, anyways, that's where I'm just going to end there because it's just like, I mean, if you want to hear my tale of woe, just watch Doom 3DO on YouTube because I had to deal with a manager there who had no clue on how games were made. And I'll leave it there.
Awesome. Thank you, Gail, so much. What a wonderful, wonderful session.